a lot of baseball fans were excited when they saw the trailer for the upcoming Peacock series on the 1990 Yankees. And the guy who was in the middle of it writing that story was my good friend, the great baseball columnist from the New York Post, Joel Sherman. He joins us now. Joel, it's Michael, Don, and Peter. How you doing?
I'm well, Mike. Hope you're well, and thanks for having me on.
All right, so what was the germination of this? How did it start?
So it's 2020. It's the kind of height of the pandemic where there's no games being played in any sport, but we're still putting out a product every day at the Post, and there's some level of desperation of what are we going to put in the newspaper. People all over the place are getting furloughed or fired, and we're trying to keep the lights on, so to speak. And I did all kinds of enterprise. And the 90 Yankees have always been on my mind on some level, Mike. I know you know the team well. We were both beat writers back then covering the team. It was the 30th anniversary. So that team had the worst record since the 1913 Yankees for the organization, which was literally the first year they had changed from the Highlanders to the Yankees. And as embarrassing as it was on the field, it was equally problematic off the field. And so I started to just make some phone calls, and the only blessing of COVID was everyone also was locked in their house. So if I called someone, they were there. I got people. They had nothing else to do, and they talked. And I just started to sketch out something, and I said to my sports editor, I think this is a series of stories. I think I could write it long form. And essentially in about 3 weeks, I wrote the equivalent of about a book, about 30 to 40,000 words, and we did it over 8 parts. And then just, beyond my control, it got, because the Post controls the stuff I write, it got then optioned to become a documentary, which drops May 16th on Peacock, 3 one-hour episodes.
All right, so let's talk about the craziness of that time, because not only were they bad on the field, as you said, but there was stuff going on in that room that you can't. Because you look at the Yankees now. The Yankees are the height of professionalism, and everything's buttoned up. But in 1990, it was really strange, Joel.
Yeah, it's. I think part of the audience for this, Mike, I hope, and I think it will be, are younger Yankee fans who, if you're of a certain age, you think it's your divine right to see a great team play every year, a contending team. But again, you and I could tell something different from the late 80s and early 90s. And I think part of the documentary also is the dichotomy, which was it couldn't have gotten lower in 90. And what you couldn't have known is all these little seeds that were being planted in 1990, that by the end of the decade, the Yankees would be the team of the 90s by, winning 3 championships, 3 of the last 4 championships of the decade. But, yeah, George Steinbrenner was not loved like he was by the end of his ownership. He was loathed. The night he was banished from baseball, there was a standing ovation at Yankee Stadium during the Yankee-Tiger game when word circulated that he had been suspended for life. They were not a destination for free agents. Free agents simply used them to build up a price and then went elsewhere, and the Yankees were in the second and third and fourth tier bucket with the Andy Hawkins and Dave LaPointe and Pascual Perez. That's like who would take their overinflated prices, with the Yankees because they weren't going to get it someplace else. And, there was a bit of a void, right? George was gone. Don Mattingly was hurt most of that year. The managers were not strong people. They were Bucky Denton, Stump Merrill. Stick Michael didn't take over until August. And, into the void stepped someone like Mel Hall, who suddenly was, star and spokesman for the team when he should have been neither.
You brought up Dent and Merrill, Joel. Were they victims or were they contributors to the disaster?
It's a good question. I think they, back then, you almost became a manager because it was your turn, as opposed to that there was a real interview vetting process the way there is now. Dent had obviously been, a part of a championship team, and in some way had some Aaron Boone comp. He hit a historic home run for the Yankees, and it changed his arc, and he got to be manager. Stump had been in the organization the whole time. And really, the two of the seeds that were planted that year, Don, that, like in real time, you couldn't have known was, as I mentioned, Stick Michael, on the last act of George Steinbrenner on the way out the door to his banishment, was he named Stick Michael general manager. And Stick began cleaning it up. And the other thing that happened that year was, Buck Showalter was elevated to the major league coaching staff in 1990 from being a very successful minor league manager. And so he was there, and he began to get kind of his major league legs. And the first thing that had to happen was that there had to be real leaders put in place, and there were with Stick and Buck. And then the first act of both guys was fumigation before addition, where they had to get a lot of bad actors out. And people like Bucky Dent and Stunt Merrill were not equipped to do that.
I'm shocked when I see the trailer, and I just want to know how this happened. Mel Hall's in jail for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
How did you guys interview?
Yeah.
I mean, do they allow people to be interviewed in jail like that?
Well, during COVID, it wasn't possible to get them on the phone. But, the gestation period, Mike, I really thought of this series and produced it in under a month. So I was just doing things in a hurry. The one blessing of the documentary is there's a little longer period of time. They reached out to, the correctional people in Texas. And if I were telling you my one regret about being involved with the documentary in any way is I told them, I said, the only thing I want is if you actually get in to see Mel Hall, I would like to be there. I hadn't seen Mel since whatever. You would know this. Me and him had some pretty bad confrontations in the day, in the early 90s. And I was also concerned, he can tell the documentarian, the director, anything, and they might not know that he was not being truthful. So I wanted to go. But it was still COVID, a period, and so they only let in the director and the cameraman, and I wasn't allowed to be part of that when they interviewed him. So there was a lot where I helped arrange some interviews, but that was not one of them. That was strictly DJ Caruso, who's the director and has directed a couple of feature films and really did an excellent job, I think, with this documentary. Was able to, him and the people at Believe Entertainment were able to secure Mel.